Lord, may the words of my mouth, meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you today. Amen. So we've been talking about hospitality for the past couple of weeks. We started off with hospitality and evangelism, and then last week we talked about hospitality and the stranger. And today we're going to look at hospitality and the lost. But who is the lost? Jesus did most of his teaching through parables, stories with lessons. We learn best through stories. In every culture, lessons are passed down either orally or in writing through stories. In Luke chapter 15, we have 3 parables on the lost. In fact, this chapter is often called the lost chapter. And 2 of the 3 parables are only found in the Gospel of Luke. Now, many of us have heard these stories before. One is very famous, but let's get reacquainted with these parables. These are the parables of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. So here is Luke chapter 14, and I am going to read all of chapter 15. And I'm going to read all of chapter 15. It's not long, it's only 32 verses. And I'm going to read it from the New International Version. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep.' I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not need to repent. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coins.' In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country. He began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But when he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in a field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But his answer to his father, 'Look, all these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My sons, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. The beginning of this chapter is actually what is so important for the rest of what we read. In fact, sometimes we only read the parables separately without this setup. Everything else is going to make sense if we actually read that first few verses. We start off with two kinds of people, the tax collectors and the sinners. Now remember that Jesus' time, Jesus would often be with the lowliest of people, and tax collectors had the lowest opinions of all the general public. So you have the tax collectors and the sinners. And what are they doing? They're gathering around Jesus so they can hear him. In some translations, they draw nearer to Jesus. The second group of people are the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, or the scribes. And they are placed opposite of the tax collectors and sinners. They sneer and jeer at Jesus and those whom he communes with. So let's keep these two groups in mind as we look at the parables. That first one was the parable of the lost sheep. This parable is also found in the Gospel of Matthew, but the context is different. In Matthew, Jesus is talking to his disciples. So one might argue that this parable was used more than once to teach the same lesson. The lost sheep is a story that is common for shepherds during that time. What is not a part of Jesus' story is that normally, when a sheep runs off and is lost, there's more than one shepherd. So one will look after the rest of the flock while the other goes for the lost sheep. But we often hear this story and think that there was only one shepherd, and that the shepherd left everything else behind to go look for that lost sheep. The story invites us to search for the lost, but most specifically the lost in faith. And who do you think Jesus was really talking to? Is the lost the tax collectors and sinners, or the Pharisees and the scribes? Jesus said there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. Sounds like he's talking about the sinners and the tax collectors. He calls them out in that last line. But what if he was really talking about the Pharisees and the scribes? Are we called to extend welcome and hospitality only to those outside the church, or inside as well? So let's put a hold on that for a second while we look at the next parable, the lost coin. What happens when you lose something important to you? A wallet, keys, a phone? A few months ago, my son lost his wallet on the bus. It was the Blue Lake Rancheria bus, and at least that's where he thought he lost it. The thing is, my sons have both learned that there are dishonest people in this world, and one had already lost a wallet on that same bus, and it was never found. And it, of course, included his money and his real ID, and if you know how about getting a real ID, it is a pain to get a replacement. So this time around, his brother had lost his wallet, and we were all a bit freaked out. This time it had his driver's permit in it, his money, real ID, and a debit card. So we all went looking for it. My husband desperately tried to catch the bus at the next bus stop, only to find that he missed it. I tried to call the Rancheria office to try to get in contact with the driver. And then my son he was the smart one, he went to the main bus stop at the Rancheria, where the bus stops for about 5 to 10 minutes in between the routes, to search for it when it came in. And upon first search, he didn't find it. But then he thought to look a little deeper, and between the seat cushions, that's where he found it. We were so thankful. You have no idea. And I think besides joy, we just felt relief. Mm-hmm. And this has probably happened to most of us at some point or another. So this parable of the lost coin is something we can relate to. It's something that resonates within us. For the shepherd and the woman, they each search for what is most precious to them. And the theme of these two parables are the same. In fact, the word or that happens at the beginning of verse 8 is what connects them. Again, who is Jesus talking to? Is he talking about the sinners who repent? Now, to repent means to return to God. The tax collectors and the sinners are already gathered around Jesus. They know who he is. They want to learn, and they are already returning to God. The Pharisees, however, are self-righteous. They do not think they are lost. They do not think they need to repent. We finally come to the third parable, the parable of the lost son, or as we often know it, the prodigal son. This is by far the most famous of Jesus' parables. This story permeates even secular teachings. And it is similar to what is found in another story in Luke of the parable of the rich fool earlier. We have once again this symbol of two opposites. The choice or fork in the road. The either and the or. In this parable, the younger son asks for his inheritance early, which basically means he's telling his father he is dead to him. He wanted nothing to do with his family anymore and to be on his own. So he takes the money and he squanders it. He hit rock bottom, was living irresponsibly, and now there were consequences. He had a choice to change or to die. When he comes home, what do we notice? First of all, we notice that the father saw him when he was a long way off. He was always watching for his son to return, hoping for that day. And the son was humbled. He confessed his sins. He owned up to his part in the situation. But the older brother was angry. He was jealous, and he resented the love that the younger brother was receiving at that time. And I think that's fairly common. How many times have we had a situation that we felt was unfair because we were the consistent and the committed ones, and somebody else who just kind of flew right in got something that we thought we should have had? We don't realize the hardening of our hearts and becoming spiteful is what makes us lost, not the ones seeking forgiveness. The older brother is like the Pharisees. Now, there is something that is in common with all three of these, and that is joy. Joy is what is taking place when something that is lost is found. Now, the verb is lost. The Greek word not only meant losing something, but to cause or experience destruction. And the other word is found. Not forgive, but found. And there is this connection with the finding and God's joy. You also notice that this chapter ends in a feast. That is where the hospitality comes in. Not only are we to be joyful, but we are to commune with those who were once lost, but now are found. These parables bring us two different kinds of people, two choices and two responses. Those who repent because they know they are lost, and those who do not repent because they do not know that they are lost. Suddenly, other stories in the Bible appear very differently to us. Luke 13, verse 3. No, I tell you, but until you repent, you will all perish as they did. To perish means to be lost. Luke 19, 9 through 10. This is the end of the story of Zacchaeus, another tax collector who sought out Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and save the lost." The lost being those same two kinds of people in chapter 15 of Luke. And then Luke 9, 24 through 25. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will save it. What does it profit them if they gain the whole world but lose or forfeit themselves? Are we also lost and ready to be found so that we might be saved through Jesus? I think one takeaway that we have from this is that we are all lost. Some of us don't know it yet. And we are all called to show welcome and hospitality to everyone, no matter how lost we are. Will you please join me in prayer? Gracious and loving Creator, we come to you humbled and lost, searching for you and how we can be found. We know this happens to us often, that once we are found, it is not that we are never lost again, but that when we are lost, we hope we know the way back. Lord, help us to understand these times, to seek truth in ourselves and in each other, to not be self-righteous and blind, but to be introspective and compassionate. We yearn to be welcoming to all people, and yes, Lord, our judgments get in the way. We hope that we can remove those walls that are in our way, and by doing that, we are able to do what you call us to do. Lord, we say all this in your name, as your Son taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins as we forgive those